Welcome back, folks, to the second of the mini-series of Irrelevancies. Yes, this is Greg the Mad Scientist Bashiro, and tonight I am discussing defenses with James the Value Man Dotson. Mr. Dotson, how goes it with the defenses?
Hey, you want to talk about irrelevancy, you have no better person to ask than the value man himself. So we'll see if there really is value in a defense or if they are, like you like to say, irrelevant.
Well, we're going to put together a Six Sigma regression trend analysis to figure out how, why, and where. Let's go. Mr. Dotson, where are we at here?
Well, here's the thing. Obviously, league setup is huge for kicker and defense more than any other position because they're the ones that can vary the most. I've seen leagues where just when somebody's trying to make the league, somehow the kickers and defenses could be the absolute highest scoring players in the entire league. I've also seen them where if your top players are getting 30 points per game, your top kicker is getting about 5 points per game, your top defense about 6 points per game. So knowing how your league is set up and how important they are just from that could end up being a huge difference in how you manage your draft and how you manage the league to begin with. So, like always, know your league first.
Exactly. And once again, if you have a league that's insanely huge, sometimes having the right defense could propel you to where you need to be. Now, there's several theories as to picking a defense itself. One of which is, do you go after a team that's laden with a lot of defensive stars and a lot of defensive talent? Let's say Pittsburgh, who is sack happy with the Jason world, and having people like Troy Polamalu out there as a free safety. Or do you go after a team like Tennessee, where you have people like Derek Morgan, who's been a player who's posted fantastic metrics when it comes down to disrupting quarterback play, and teams like Tennessee again with Jarrell Casey, who recorded 10.5 sacks and 54 total tackles last year? Or do you take a look at the teams that are playing a weaker schedule and go from there? Your thoughts on this?
Well, again, know your league first. If you get lots of points for sacks, then having teams like Pittsburgh, for example, Cincinnati gets a lot of sacks each year. How about Carolina had 60 sacks last year? That's 6-0.
Yeah.
60 sacks. That's incredible. How about looking at Houston now that you have both Williams and J.J. Watt? Or I said Williams. What's his name? Clowney. There it is.
Clowney, yes. It's Jadeveon Clowney. You're thinking of Mario Williams up in Buffalo.
I'm thinking of Mary Williams in Buffalo because that's where I was going next, because you can get a lot of sacks from him up in Buffalo. They've looked good in the preseason before. So if you're looking at sacks, those are all teams that are very worthy of doing it. If you're looking for turnovers, a team you stay away from is Pittsburgh, who ranked almost dead last, even with all that talent in the turnovers they get. If you want turnovers, you look at a team like, Seattle is the big name there, obviously. 40 turnovers last year. Really, that's about 7 or 8 more than any other team was even close to. So you can look that route. Or you can look, do you get big points for those that are returned for touchdowns? A la Kansas City, who had 7 defensive touchdowns plus another 4 special teams touchdowns last year. So lots of different strategies you can go about in terms of where you get your defensive production. Or there's one we haven't even mentioned yet, points per game. A lot of the leagues are based on how many points or how many yards you allow. Seattle, Cincinnati, Carolina, all allowed under 20 points per game, which is absolutely huge. The big thing you need to look at here, Greg, I think, in these defenses, the NFL is completely different than it was even 10 years ago. 10 years ago, I would say there would probably be 20 defenses any given week that I would be more than happy with playing because offenses just weren't as good at that point. You could play matchups pretty well. Nowadays, though, I feel there are so many strong offenses that can just absolutely destroy a defense, even some of the better defenses, that it makes it very tough to kind of play the guess and check game. I know that's what you like to do, is play the matchups each week, but I'm thinking it's getting a little bit too tough to do so.
I would have to agree with you on that right now, because it's actually come down to a science now, especially when you have, the architect of the zone defense or the zone blitz, being the defensive coordinator for Pittsburgh. And then you take a look at how other teams have basically, ramped themselves up to play that defensive game. And it's actually come down to a fine science. And of course, in fantasy football, it's all about the metric. It's all about, who's going to get you the greatest number. So once again, you need to know your league. Second of all, you need to know how many people are drafting in your league. I was just informed that the 360 Sports Network League is going to be up to 16 teams. So with that said, yes, the defense is going to play a major role because, well, you got 16 teams. That's pretty much half of the NFL basically being drafted if everybody picks one defensive team.
Right, and there's a big difference between the top-rated defense of Seattle and our 16th rated defense of the Indianapolis Colts. Which one are you going to want there, Greg?
I mean, come on now.
Exactly. Now, here's the other thing that I wanted to mention. With so many teams focusing more on the offense, and obviously their defense suffers as a result, already we've been seeing the defensive numbers dropping more and more, especially if some leagues allow for negative points. If you give up too many yards or too many points, that can make a big difference. Obviously, even if you get a goose egg from a defense, that could be better than going negative, which some defenses can do. And also something to keep in mind this year, Greg, they're looking at the illegal contacts and the holdings and the bump and run coverages a lot more heavily this year. I expect even higher record-breaking scoring outputs from a lot of teams this year because quarterbacks really are just going to be, honestly, they're going to be in trouble. They're not going to be able to defend these receivers.
No, I have to agree with you on that as well. I mean, so you have to be very careful with teams that put them in jeopardy with, stupid penalties and basically, keeping themselves from being too hot-headed as well.
Right. Now, Greg, let me ask you this. It's draft day. Whether it's, your normal 12-team league or, like you said, our now 16-team 3SN league, what is your thought process in terms of getting that defense? When do you get them? I know you normally like to wait as long as you can and get a defense pretty much in the last round because you play the matchups. Enlighten us on your thought process.
Well, once again, and here's the big thing. When you go into a fantasy football draft, and, yes, I'm telling you my strategy. So, I could be shooting myself in my foot here by sharing the strategy, but it does work. Stick with the strategy. Don't waver. Don't panic. Don't panic because all of a sudden it's like, wait a second, one of my top-rated defenses, Seattle, just got scooped up in the 6th round. Oh, my God. You want those defenses to get scooped up early because that's when you can start focusing on your value players. I still believe you look at a top-rated defense no sooner than the 13th round.
There you have it, 13th round. I can almost guarantee that Seattle will go before that.
Of course.
But
and you
in
want
terms
them
of
to. You want them to.
You want them to. You're right. In terms of the value, let them go off the board. Because here's the other thing: not only will they go off the board, once the defense goes and then the second defense goes, it is a run on defenses in almost every league. People, like you said, they panic. They take a defense way too early. You end up seeing defenses like Green Bay going off in the 10th round, and it's like, wait, what are you guys thinking right now?
So you don't say that because as a savvy drafter, you encourage them. Yeah, take them. Go, run with them, please.
Oh, darn, I should have gotten my defense that last round.
Yeah, well, meanwhile, I'm picking up, Eddie Lacy.
Now, Greg, I agree 100% with that attitude that you don't want to go and reach and get that defense. However, I'm in a little bit of a difference for a couple of reasons. A, getting and playing the matchups each week, which essentially is what you would have to do with this strategy, and hopefully finding good guys on the waiver wire, that's going to become more and more difficult to do because, frankly, more and more fantasy owners are starting to do that. And in a 16-team league, first of all, you're probably going to have about, we'll say, 12 teams defenses to even work with on the waiver wire each week. How many of those are going to be worthy of picking up and starting that week? Second of all, there's probably at least 3 or 4 others in your league who are also going to be going after that waiver wire. So you can't guarantee that you'll even get that top pick, right?
That's correct. To answer basically where you're at, I think what you need to do is you need to kind of zone in on your top 10 defenses that are out there, and kind of keep in the back of your head where you want these things to be, right? Where you want to pick your defense. Once again, yeah, of course, everybody wants Seattle's defense because they're hot on the takeaways. Tennessee's defense, I think, is a very strong value defense. Pittsburgh's defense is, I think, a very strong value defense as well. Carolina, once again. But this is the big thing. Start watching where these start falling, and weigh your value players against the value defense itself. To me, I think if you're entering the 10th round, and let's say 5 or 6 defenses have been taken, and you've already have, let's say your top 10 defenses already picked, and you see 2 or 3 of those top 10 defenses, if you're still on the board, roll the dice and then pick up one of those defenses maybe a little bit later on, and you'll find somebody there.
Yeah, and you said it right there. There are some defenses that I think are being extremely undervalued in most leagues. I actually think Carolina is the second best defense this year. I mean, they got Luke Kuechly, the defending defensive player of the year. They're rated normally about 5th or 6th on most draft boards. They're my second-rated defense. I think Buffalo, who's rated outside in the top 10 normally, I have them in my top 5 with what they've shown me so far in what they've done in the offseason, what they did last year, and what they've done in preseason. So you can get great value with those two being available a lot later than what most people think.
I can almost guarantee right now Buffalo's defense will probably be overlooked until about the 14th round.
Right, and that's where I normally get them, is about the 13th to 14th round, when I've got enough backups that I'm definitely looking to get that defense. Now, the thing about Carolina and Buffalo, and why I like them even when in that 13th and 14th round, both of those teams, I feel extremely confident that I could start them against pretty much any team in the NFL. There are very few defenses out there that I feel that way. Those two, I feel pretty confident about Cincinnati, and I definitely feel confident about Seattle above everybody else. And because of that reason right there, I will draft a defense maybe a little earlier than conventional wisdom says, if I can guarantee myself that, look, I'm drafting this guy, I'm drafting him for value, I'm drafting this defense for value. They're not going to be valuable if I'm dumping them onto the free agency market every other week. And they're only valuable if I'm going to start them throughout the entire season. And that's why I really like getting Seattle actually in about the 7th or 8th round. Yes, that sounds early, but I want them in the 7th or 8th round because I know I will start them each and every week through their bye week in week 11.
I think that's still too early, but I follow your line of thought, but I really think even a team like Seattle, a defense like Seattle, no sooner than the 10th.
And I can understand that completely. And again, it depends on how your league is set up, how many teams are in that league. Only reason I say 8th is that if I'm really focused on the fact that I really want to base my team around having Seattle's defense. If I try to wait till the 10th, I won't get them. So I'm looking to push it up a little bit higher.
But do you really want them? Then you compare that to the value players that are being out there.
Right, and that's the issue you need to make, and that's dependent on what you've done already in the draft, and if you have the good value players and maybe even a solid bench set up already at that point. So there's lots of variables that need to go in. I agree. If it were a perfect world, I'd be saying wait until about the 10th round, but I think I'm willing to go as high as the 8th round and not feel too bad about myself with it.
Well, Mr. Dotson, take Seattle in the 8th, and I'll pat you on the back.
And we'll see what happens when December rolls around, right, Greg?
Hey, I'll be happy picking Buffalo and beating your butt in the Super Bowl.
There you go. There you go.
Well, folks, that's it on our analysis of the irrelevant defenses. By the way, it's not so irrelevant because these positions, especially the defensive position, can oftentimes give you that extra edge to propel you to that playoff spot. Remember, folks, draft well. And our next podcast will be on drafting strategy. So please tune in next time to listen to the value man, James Dotson, the Saint Alex DeLaverson, and of course, yours truly, the Mad Scientist. Take care, draft well,